Welcome to another episode of All Shot Let's Talk. With me today, I have Roald from Buuren, who has been in esports for over 2 decades. He's been general manager for Fnatic, and he has also built Face It. He was one of the brains behind Flashpoints, and ultimately it became ESL Face It Group. And with over 2 decades, he has now felt the need to start his own company. It's called ELO Agency. We're going to go into that later. So welcome, Roald.
Thanks, Lofa. Excited to have a chat with you after quite some years. I think that we've not spoken, so looking forward to it.
Yeah. So in the early days, when you're around 18, 20, like how did you get into esports in the first place?
Well, I think I was a bit younger when I started. For me, kind of the journey started, I suppose, with Call of Duty 1. So I will have been around 12 years old, I think. That's kind of the first multiplayer game that I really picked up. It obviously was just playing it quite casually. And then, Call of Duty 2 came out and it became more and more serious. At the time, you had something called clan base, which, I guess the best equivalent you now have is kind of like, the old ESEA kind of ladders and so on. I was playing in there with teams and so on. You had got Q Cup and clan-based open cups and things. So it became more and more professional from my side, becoming more and more interested. And I think at some point, started playing more and more, and it kind of just took over my life. I think like with most people who really enjoy their gaming, but I still remember very fondly that with my team we were kind of looking for sponsors and things, and I was playing on some servers, and back in the day you always had someone with like their team tag, and behind it was like Steel Series or Ice Mat you had back in the day, and you started seeing more and more like the team tag and an esports behind it. Now, at the time I didn't know that what esports was, and I think the word didn't really exist yet. So it started to come more and more through. And so I started Googling what is esports. Nothing came up. I was thinking it was a company sponsoring all these teams. At some point I had a very awkward conversation with someone. I was like, can you give me the website for esports and can they sponsor me? And someone was like, dude, what are you talking about? It's just competitive gaming, So, that was, I suppose, my first encounter with the word esports. And from there on, kind of roller coaster. I think Call of Duty 4 came out where the COD scene became a bit more professional and then started to get big organizations involved. But for me, I didn't enjoy the game so much because it went from World War II and quite slow paced to very fast paced and kind of spray and pray kind of gameplay. But I still love the industry. My friends were playing, so I went more to the background because I wanted to stay involved with my friends. So I started managing teams. I started kind of writing a bit about what was going on in the Call of Duty scene. And, being a former player, I was in touch with most of the pro players. And whenever there was something happening within the industry, they dropped me a line and said, like, look, we're going to get picked up by SK Gaming or Meet Your Makers at the time, or Fnatic or Four Kings. So I kind of became the guy who always had the breakthrough news. And through that, I started working for a team called Four Kings, which I guess for a lot of people won't ring a bell anymore. But at the time, it was one of the big organizations, and they were known to have Grubby, which is a legendary Warcraft 3 player, and Moon. So it was a really well-established team. And then later Fnatic came calling and asked if I wanted to become their Call of Duty 4 writer. And that was really my first paycheck within esports. And to be honest, it wasn't much, but I think I was about 16-year-old at the time. So it was quite nice. And it did help me pay for games and new computer hardware and stuff. So, I was very happy with it. But through Fnatic, worked my way up. First, I became kind of a general editor, started covering all the other games. Later became editor-in-chief and did that for a couple of years, and finally settled as general manager, where at the time I was kind of in charge of the partnership with Own 3D, which was the the big rival of Twitch at the time, and it was the streaming platform that Fnatic was using. But yeah, after a while, decided to kind of step down, focus a bit more on studies. Pressure from parents obviously involved there. I think that lasted for about 6 months before I started another project called. Basically, the idea was to start esports kind of coverage website for like new FPS titles that came out, and the first one was Shootmania. So I started shootmaniaesports.com, which kind of became like the leading website for Shootmania. And through there, I got in touch a lot with a player called Sturmy, who I already knew from my time back in Fnatic because he played Quake Live for Fnatic. And so yeah, I was interviewing him all the time because he basically was the best player out there on every single event. And after a while, he said to me, like, I'm working on this project here in Italy. It's called Face It. Do you want to have a chat with my co-founders and see if you're interested in doing something with us? So had a phone call with Michele and Nicolo from Face It. Ended up flying over to Milan, basically on a day trip, and kind of fell in love with their vision and what they were trying to build. And from there on, kind of my journey roller coastered into, what Face It obviously in EFG Group is today. But, obviously joining very early on, I was doing a lot of everything, from community management to logistics to accounting to tournament hosting and organizing. Over the years, obviously, the company grew more and more, became more and more professional and more structured. And, I think the big step came when Face It moved to London. The team grew, I think, from 12 people to, 50, 60 people very quickly from there on, which meant, obviously, my role got much more defined and became director of esports, I think VP of events first and then director of esports, but the roles were pretty much the same, just different title. And it was basically, Face It existed in two kind of verticals. One was the platform, the dev one plays on, and now is kind of for Counter-Strike the go-to place, right? And the other side is the events. So I sat on that event side, and kind of anything related to teams and players kind of fell under my jurisdiction. Basically did that until the Face It was sold to or merged with ESL and sold to Savvy Games. And then I decided my time and kind of my mission with Face It was completed. So I decided to take some time off. Did that for about a year, checked off all the, the personal achievements, I suppose, that I didn't have the time for. So I got engaged, had a baby, all the stuff that I guess I just was too busy for. I did it in the span of a year, basically. After our baby girl was born, I decided, I'm ready to get back into the action. I started to get a bit bored.
Yeah.
So, was looking for some roles to do kind of, more of a 9 to 5 rather than the chaos. So that is running events but couldn't really find anything that I thought, really piqued my interest, or, sometimes I wasn't suitable for the role. So in the end, earlier in the year, beginning of this year, I decided to kind of start off on my own. Always wanted to, but never really had like, look, oh my God, amazing idea. So it's like, what's the point then if you don't have a great idea? And then started to toy with the idea of agency, because I definitely believe, I have the experience to do something better than what's out there. But you see every single week there's a new agency coming. So it's like, I can maybe do it better, but you start an uphill battle, against 100 other agencies. So why not kind of start to focus on the experience that I've built for the last 10 years with Face It, and that's kind of the event side. So that's where ELO was born, to kind of fill that gap behind the EFGs and PGLs and Blast, where they always see very grand productions and obviously they have big teams and do have lots of projects running where we kind of want to be a bit more boutique and really tailor make products and do something very custom made and really make sure that the clients that we have really work with experts rather than a product manager. So that's where Elo was born, and we kind of just started on this journey, but so far it's been pretty exciting, and we have some cool stuff in the pipeline that we're working on, and hopefully get announced quite soon.
So rolling back the time a bit, at the time at Fnatic, like the general manager position, like what kind of decision, like, are you proud of that you made? Like, what players did you sign? And also, what sponsors did you get along? Or like, what is someone that sticks out to you that you're happy or proud of during that time?
I think the Quake Live team at the time was really something that I was heavily involved with of getting them on board, because it was a game. Quake in general is a game that I love because I think from a spectator perspective, it's the perfect game because it's very simple to understand, but there's so much depth to it. As you get into it, it's just very difficult for players to get into, which is obviously always been its downfall. But just getting that team involved and seeing how they grew, I think was the main thing that excited me and was something I was very happy with over time. And obviously, at the end of the day, that's what kind of got me into FACE IT, because that relationship that I built with one of the players, Sturmy. So,
yeah. Fun fact also, early days of FACE IT, if people don't know, Roald used to be my boss. Thank God he isn't anymore. But I was working one DreamHack, I think it was 2012 or 13, and Fnatic had a team there as well. And I think it was Street Danny, who was the GM by then. And after that event, he's like, "Hey, I have someone. There's a company called FACE IT. They're looking for someone." I'm like, "Okay, what should I do?" "Oh, it's Counter-Strike." I'm like, "I have never done Counter-Strike." "Don't worry, you did find this event. You're gonna figure it out."
Yeah.
I want to tell my story as well a little bit, like how we met and so on. And basically, it was kind of a quick Skype call. I was thrown into a group chat and. People that are admins today, I can tell you have it better.
I mean, yeah, no, not even a shadow of doubt,
So I was thrown into a group chat. I got an Excel sheet, and then I had to figure out myself, pretty much.
Yeah, that was the way.
And it was a program called Olark, and I still have nightmares of that program. With like all the like spam coming up and the pluck sound and so on, but it was kind of great. And I also went to Italy eventually, and I also liked it there. But also during your time there, you was also co-living, right, with DDK and Georgie and Niels, right?
Yeah.
How was that? And like, can you explain a little bit to the public how it was like in the early days of the startups and what happened in that flat, so to speak?
It was look at the time you just went through it, and the reality was from the moment you wake up until the moment basically you were ready to go to sleep, you spent at the office. So at the end of the day, we also probably tried to be as little time at home because it was really like a dorm, the guy snoring next to you kept you up all night, and the other guy woke up early in the morning and woke you up. So looking back, it was not a great experience, and it felt very much like we were a bunch of students living abroad together. And it gave me a very clear understanding of what I don't want in life, and and that's roommates. No, it was tough at times, but we also had a lot of fun, and I think with those guys, even though I don't really speak to them that much, I think we've created a bond that probably will last forever. And and if we meet each other in let's say 30 years time, we'll still be talking about those days, and laughing about it like it was yesterday, I think. So
when did you feel like during that time, you're all working in the office, there's long hours, there's especially for you a lot to do at the time. Even when I was there, I tried to facilitate a little bit of your job as good as I could. what made you when did you started to think like, okay, we are actually going to make it soon? I don't have to live with these guys anymore, and we are actually, making it. When did you start to feel that?
Um, well, I think to roll it back, I remember there was a time when we were in the office, and Nicolo, the CEO of Faceit, now the co-CEO, I think, of EFG, he said, you know, this is the break or make moment. If we're not going to find revenue anytime soon, by the end of summer, we're going to go bankrupt, and everyone's going to go back to their normal lives, basically. And I think that was a moment where everyone kind of pulled together and really pushed hard to make sure that Faceit at least got that stable base. But on the other hand, it was also quite scary because it was for everyone, it was their passion project and their baby, so no one wanted it to go down. But I think the moment where it probably really hit home is I think when we were in London and we opened our real proper office there, in Soho, the middle of the city. We shared the office with Twitch, another big company. I think I remember walking through that office and we were all building tables together and chairs and things. I think that was a moment where and I remember standing there with Nick, one of the co-founders, and we were like, wow, we've done it, Obviously, it was not profitable back then, and we were still working crazy hours and we're still quite small, but it was definitely a defining moment in my mind where it was like, we've really built something here now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, I noticed the change a little bit after the premium ladders came, and people buying Prime like crazy, like there was no tomorrow. I think that is the best thing they ever did. It's the smartest thing they ever did in general, because the amount of workload you got after that was quite extent to the point where you almost, went into a wall. But it was nice. It was a good experience for sure. For me also, in the beginning, there was it was still Quake around when I was there. I remember you also had some events, at DreamHack for Quake. How did that work? Because I wasn't really in touch with Quake as much during my time at Faceit, but like, how do you look at the Quake kind of era of Faceit? Do you want to say it was successful, or was it a try and it died, or like, how would you look for it?
No, it was definitely, I think, successful. And for Faceit, I think, and that's been the story for Faceit, and why I think it's one of the big successes is that it grew organically, right? And that was the whole idea behind Quake, is like, let's not go big or go home straight away. Let's start with a smaller title where I can really like put our footprint and then move on. Obviously after that came Counter-Strike and Dota. But, start small and then grow from there. So with Quake, I think what we're doing was pretty cool at the time. It was like we did a Open Cup every single Sunday, which then led into, I think, seasonal finals. Every single Sunday was broadcasted with DDK, and then we flew in someone every time to co-host with him. Sometimes it was Zoot, but sometimes it was also these Quake players who came over to do it. So for the time it was quite a decent production. And it really kind of established Faceit within that industry, within the scene, and Quake still was quite respectable at the time. And it really gave us learnings, of how to expand and the difficulties, that you might face on a small scale, so you can really prepare for it on a bigger scale with a game like Counter-Strike. So in that sense, it was very successful, and it did definitely help the scene go on for quite a long time, at quite reasonable level, even though the player base might have not been huge. We got a couple of thousand viewers every single Sunday. So and I think to this day we've done probably one of the coolest production with Quake as well, was the Legends Cup, where we got all these old school players back to play in like this invitational tournament. Really cool kind of graphic style, like cartoon animations and things. So, we did some really cool stuff with it, I think. And at the end of the day, like I said, it was the first step to organically grow into a big company.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on the topic because most people they wouldn't even know that you actually had a big, Quake era as well.
Mm.
So yeah, and I think it's a valuable insight for people, and also like they should know more about the history and so on. So moving
Well,
forward,
definitely, and I think it's good because people see that Face It didn't just come, and didn't just throw money at the wall hoping that it would stick. No, it grew from a small company, really, slowly taking its steps and trying things. And if you look at basically any successful company within esports, it's been the same journey. ESL, same thing. They grew from a couple of guys from SK starting some friendly competitions, and obviously we know what the beast is of ESL is today. So
yeah.
and the successful teams, most of them grew similarly from very small. So
But like since you brought up ESL, wasn't it the case then like even if they grow big, it was very hard for them to be profitable, and hence the merge with Face It and the bought out from the Saudis was needed to happen in order for them to keep operating.
I obviously don't have insight in how ESL operated exactly, but I think the reality is they had a lot of people. If I compare what ESL were doing to what we're doing at Face It, in terms of events, obviously ESL did way more. Probably some bigger scale things, and maybe the quality sometimes was better for ESL.
Yeah, yeah.
But the reality is they had a team of probably about 500 people. We had a team of 10 people, right? So if you then have to look at the bottom line, and events, the margins are so small. um it sometimes makes more sense to kind of cut on quality, but then have a smaller team of people working on it rather than having to hire crazy amounts of people. So at the end of the day, I think sometimes they maybe try to do too much, and in that sense hired a lot of people, and kind of became a bit of a bureaucratic company through that. And I think, for Face It, we always had the luck that we had the technology platform as well there. And, for our events, it was crucial that, it was almost a marketing tool for the platform. And we didn't do events for the sake of making a profit, right? Which ESL was trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And which is, to this day, still massively difficult, if not impossible.
Yeah. Speaking of that, since we're touching the subject and so on, and old school and new school and so on, what game over the years surprises you the most that made a successful esports title, like of the games that are currently out there?
I mean, I have to say League of Legends, because when it came out, there was a massive naysayer. Like I thought I think you had Heroes of Newerth at the time, and you had Dota 2, which everyone was saying like these are the two big games. Obviously, Hero of Newerth doesn't exist anymore, as far as I know. Dota 2 obviously is still big, but League of Legends is a game of its own. So how they kind of turned that around, and well, thankfully prove me wrong, and kind of their strategy, how they executed it, is, I think a lot of game developers will look at them and think like, we want to do that. It's probably why a lot of game developers fail with their esports programs, but it's obviously a massive example for companies out there. So League of Legends, definitely. Let me just think if there's any other game. I think how the Call of Duty League has done recently, I think, has surprised me quite a bit. I think looking at the Overwatch League, I expected Call of Duty to kind of go down that same route of just obviously failing, and Overwatch now going the open ecosystem with EFG. So I think the COD League has done quite well, and that surprised me quite a lot, that how successful it's become.
Any thoughts on mobile games?
I mean, obviously, especially MLBB is proving to be crazy. It's not the scene that I have a finger on the pulse that much, simply because I don't really play mobile games myself. But I think recently, obviously, with the fact that it's at EWC, you see a lot of teams now picking up or a lot of orgs picking up teams there now. I think, I'm definitely going to give it a go to play it, and obviously going to watch a bit as well to see what's going on there. But obviously, the accessibility of it in especially kind of the more underdeveloped markets like Southeast Asia, the MENA region, potentially Africa as well. I think it has huge potential to kind of get a different player base involved in esports.
Yeah, I think it's accessibility. Myself was kind of like, oh, mobile esport is never gonna be anything, right? But then you think about it, like you more times flies by. Everyone has a smartphone, some kind of a smartphone, in every country, and it's so accessible. And even internet cafes in Philippines, they just switch out from PC to just having a sofa where people can sit and play pretty much, and they play on the Wi-Fi, and it's kind of,
Yeah.
you know, kind of nice to see that you are wrong sometimes as well. Because that means you're more working, you're more games that are in the industry, the better it is for you guys like you and me, because then you probably
Exactly.
so I'm actually surprised. But then another game that I would say that I'm surprised hasn't risen more is Critical Ops, which is basically a CS clone on mobile.
Yeah.
And I think it has, because when you watch it, it's very easy. That's the one thing I would give Counter Strike in general compared to Dota or League, for example. It's very easy to understand what needs to be done. Uh, and they also had some struggles, I guess, with their esports program and so on. But hopefully they bounce back soon. Because if you look at it, like it should attract the kind of the same viewers, right? And you need to be really good, like the plays that they do as well, that fast. Like I can tell you, I will never be able to be that good on a mobile game ever.
No,
So there's
say
impressive skill, because you're so used to you sit down and like they are used all like this all the time. So it's very impressive. And
yeah.
do you think in the future, like mobile games have a bigger place, or I'm not saying it's going to overtake, but like, do you think the bigger shares of esports will turn towards mobile games in the future?
Probably. And I think at the end of the day, it's also kind of depends on how VR, I think, develops. And I think VR and mobile can go hand in hand with each other to kind of surpass things. Um, I think, even if PC will always have a place, I think. Even if you look at recent data, it's like sales of PC games and PCs, have been outdoing consoles for the past years now. So, and the ease of using a mouse and keyboard will always win in that sense. So, whether it will overtake PC esports, I don't know. I don't think it will, at least, not in our near future. And as long as we're kind of active in this industry, hopefully. I say hopefully because I am a PC gamer by heart. So, but I think over the long run, the more and more people, the young people, grow up with mobile phones in their hands and are good with it, the more and more that will become the norm, I think. So,
Yeah. Uh, so talking a bit, going in more towards the Saudi topic and the esport sponsorship program, do you think this is good, or do you think it will hurt the scene?
I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing in the sense that, it gives another sustainable, or at least another point of revenue for teams, which I think is obviously needed. So it will at least, for the short term help them out. At the end of the day, it depends on how long EWC decides to stick around. Yeah, I think it's a very kind of top down way of approaching it, which is not necessarily something I believe in. I think at the end of the day, grassroots needs to be grown for kind of the professional scene to thrive, and you see that exactly the same in every successful esports. League of Legends, Counter Strike, everything grew from grassroots into to professional. But obviously, this is money trickling in from the top rather than from the bottom up. So from that perspective, I think both sides need to be catered from by EWC as well, and obviously the Saudi kind of ecosystem that they're trying to build is I think they have a unique opportunity to do something different compared to what esports has done, but also if we compare what they're doing in other sports, I think they can approach esports differently, and can kind of become much more the central hub for it if they wanted to. So
Yeah, I think it's good, that players in Oryx now have an incentive to survive. But I also feel like there is a lot of teams, that would need this little bump more to, in other games, so like have a more stability for tier 2 and tier 3, because I'm afraid if this is going to keep on going, that the top always get the most. I mean, in general, that is how it should be. Like, if you are the best, you deserve the best, right? But not to the extent that people don't even want to pursue a career in it. Like, because I feel like if this continues the way it has, we have no tier 2 or tier 3, and the lack of talent itself might, uh, kill the scene eventually if it's too top.
Yeah, like you said, there needs to be at the end of the day, a program that leads into that top, which is attainable and accessible. Like you see in other sports, you obviously have, or at least European sports, you have the program of or like the Premier League. You have the Championship underneath, so you have relegation and promotion to get into that, and there's a very clear way to get to the top. Wrexham now with Ryan Reynolds is a great example of how you can go from like the very low tiers of football, to, I think they're in the Championship or League Two now. So, it's esports needs to create the same thing where there's a sustainable path for lower tier teams to survive in those tiers, but also to get up to that top tier kind of program or leagues that there are.
Yeah, I think the problem, that we have in esports, or like not really a problem, is a luxury. Like, you can be an organization, right? And then you can be in multiple titles, and that is usually not what is going on in other areas of sports. In North America, unheard of. If you have a franchise in one game or one sports, that is your sports, and it's not going outside of that league, and they have commissioners and so on, and everyone like have revenue shares and so on. I know there's been revenue share talking for years in esports, but somehow everything still at the end fails, because there's not enough revenue or sustainability. Because I think it's easy for us to say it in like, hey, we should have this program and they should like this top teams and so on. But what games then? Like, should it be, okay, the top 10, or like only the 5 games, or like what games should we make room for? Should it be another game added per year? Like, how do you look at it that? Because it's not as simple as we might, seem that we have said.
I mean, this is the difficulty, right? Because unlike sports, sport doesn't have an owner or someone who can pull a plug. You can't say like, all right, we stop basketball now. No one can play basketball anymore. You can't go to the courts and shoot some hoops. It's not, it doesn't exist obviously in sport. Well, with games, you can have a developer who stops hosting servers, and then the game is gone. And so that makes things much more tricky. And if we're looking at tournaments organizers, not every game developer wants their game to become an esport, so they might not give out licenses to do it. So it's very much dependent on that as well, and that makes it much more tricky. So it's also just which game developer wants to be active in this, who wants to put money into building esports programs, rather than just say like, okay, we want to cherry pick these games. I think it's at the end of the day, you need to cooperate with a lot of stakeholders. Again, something that makes esports trickier from other sports. So it's like you said, it's not as straightforward to saying like, we want these 5 games or these 10 games. I think it will just happen naturally, and some games will come, some games will disappear, some games will last 1 year, other games will last 10, 20 years. So it will kind of go as it will go, right? And in general, I think it's what we often do is we look at esports as a whole, and maybe sometimes we should look at individual titles more and approach it that way. Like every title is its own sport almost.
I think that would be more reasonable, and is also one of the reasons why this industry is so doom and gloom, and we see a lot of people either leaving or people like companies go bankrupt and so on. The people that advocate for esports usually over exaggerate how good it is. They'll be like, oh, we have more viewers than the NFL. yes, maybe in total, but how many are paying? You know,
Yeah,
I think monetization is also a
exactly.
problem. And I also, to be fair, I don't think TOs or others have actually, tried like so much with it either, because they depend on sponsorship, and the sponsorships depends on numbers. How do you see that change in the future? Do you think it will be more ways to for people that they kind of have to pay to watch certain games, or because it's not sustainable
Uh,
to stay the same for now?
no, exactly. There needs to be a change, and I saw a stat the other day. I think it said esports teams are 75% of their revenue comes from sponsorships. If you look at other sports teams, that's about 25%. So and the difficulty is we talk about esports winter, and it's true. Esports is going through its struggles, but if you look at the greater economy, it's not just esports which is struggling. Look at the general games industry. How many layoffs there's been in the tech industry as well. The world is going through two wars. Um, the interest rates are higher than ever before. So we shouldn't just be talking about esports winter. But the problem why esports is hit so hard is because of the reliability on those income sources of those companies which are also struggling to pay esports, right? And that's the problem why such heavy reliance on a single kind of revenue stream is just not sustainable. Because when there's a down year, you'll be hit so hard that suddenly you have to lay off half your workforce or whatever. Um, so in that sense, yes, there needs to be a change. The difficulty is achieving that change, and the normal models of paying subscribers is now we're in a stage where it's difficult to introduce, because we have a whole generation, and you and I are part of that too, where we expect things to be free. If one tournament organizer now goes, all right, we're charging you five euros to watch this tournament, they're gonna go like, well, sorry, there's 5 other tournaments going on this weekend. I'll watch those instead, and they're gonna be stay free because they know they're gonna get extra viewership, by staying free. So it's very difficult to make that change, and if I had the answer, I would be going around and making a lot of profitable. But there needs to be some sort of more trials with freemium models. I know that a lot of tournament organizers have tried things, but they try for one event.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it didn't work, so let's stop trying. But there needs to be a sustained way of trying, and maybe at the end of the day, we need some cooperations between companies too. And we always hear that competition is good between companies, but I think in esports it's probably done more damage than good. If we look at what the tournament organizers, for example, ESL and Faceit and Blast and PJ over the years have done is kind of create unsustainability, because they're trying to keep up in quality with each other. So every time you need to step up and pay more, because Blast did something new, or ESL did something new, and it became something where tournament organizers are paying so much money that they're making no profit at all. So there's then no revenue to share with the teams, really. So it's esports in a way has put itself in a very difficult place, and maybe you will need an EWC to kind of come in and say, like, we don't care about all these politics in these games. We're just going to do our things. We're going to throw money at it, and you're either part of it or not part of it. And maybe it will kind of cause a bit of a reset. On the other hand, maybe what's also required is a couple of years of struggle, where we kind of go back to zero, and then kind of rebuild from there. Obviously, it might cause some bankruptcies, and it will definitely cause some people to lose their jobs. But in the long run, will become more sustainable because of that, probably. So, I think the solution that is probably the most sustainable one is going to cause a lot of short-term pains and probably a lot of short-term complaints as well. So,
I think when you think about it, I'm kind of the same. Oh, it is a stream here at Blast or Faceit or whatever. I will watch it and know. I wouldn't even think about paying in general, But then I'm a huge hockey fan. I watched like 300 NHL games, per season. I have no trouble paying for that. and that costs way more than a Twitch subscription to have that for a year. There
Yeah,
is
and
no hesitation in my mind. So I think the mindset that we have kind of have to change.
but the difference is that you have no other way to consume hockey. If you're not paying, you're not watching. With esports, and Counter Strike is a great example of that. If you're not watching if you're not paying for ESL Counter Strike, there's Blast Counter Strike you can watch, or next year PGL and Starladder Counter Strike you can watch. So that's why it's often not worth for people to pay, because there's another option out there. While with regular sports, there's not. Here in the UK, you have to pay for Sky subscription, which is insane. It's like £80 a month or something, to watch Premier League. I pay it because I love football and I want to watch football. But yeah, it's the only way I can consume it. So I have to deal with it.
Do you think the TOs should sit together? Or it probably won't happen, but do you think they should sit together and hey, how can we actually make this profitable for us? Let's try this for a couple of months to charge. Doesn't have to be €5 or €6, but maybe $1, $2, to see if there would be. Obviously, you're going to lose a lot of viewers, but I also think they would actually see revenue for the first time. And then if I am a sponsor, I'm going to sponsor an esports event, and I see, they actually have thousands of paying subscribers, I'm more likely to sponsor that event.
I mean, it's probably what is needed. I don't know if it would be completely legal to do that, because it might be like market manipulation and things like that. So
yeah.
It's not as simple as just some orgs sitting together. Beyond the fact that it'll probably not even happen. I know we face it. We've tried to cooperate with other tournament organizers, and I think the will of everyone was there. But then there was always, at the end of the day, the question of how do you divide the cake, and there was never a conclusion on that. So as much of goodwill there was between the people to make it happen, it never concluded, because at the end of the day, if you have so many stakeholders, it's almost impossible to come to agreements on that kind of stuff. So, it's so complicated that it's not a simple matter of let's come together and let's all agree to something.
Do you think there will be a league that are paid to watch that will succeed within the next 5 years, or do you think it's still too early, or do you think it will happen, or people are forced to do it in order to survive, or how do you see it?
Well, I think in games that there are monopolies, it can be done, a League of Legends. There's obviously no other League of Legends competition worthwhile watching, so that can be a place where they do it. Riot is probably not incentivized to do it, because they care about getting the eyeballs on the latest skins and things, right? And not necessarily driving so much revenue with esports. But in kind of games like these, I think there's possibilities. COD League is a potential one, or even Overwatch League. It can be tried, or the new Overwatch Championship Series, I think it's called. They can try it. Games like Counter Strike and Dota 2, I think it's too far gone in a certain direction that it's pretty much impossible. But the newer titles, yeah, definitely, I think there's a way that it can be done. But yeah, as I said, there needs to be, you need to have a big monopoly in order to kind of pull that off.
Yeah. And also, while talking about the industry itself and TOs and so on, organizations hasn't really helped either, I guess, because we have seen a lot closing down. Even some of the biggest ones, are verge of bankruptcy and so on. And I think it's, for me personally, how I see it, before COVID, there was a lot of VC floating around, and they wanted the best players. The best players cost, amount X, and, they would have this salary and so on. And now, after COVID, as you said, the whole world is struggling with layoffs and so on. You can see the effect still, and I think we're gonna feel the COVID effect for many more years to come. How do you see organization changing? I know at least 30 teams have some supplements now with the program that was released, but how would you say other orgs will do? They're not a part of that program.
Yeah, I mean, I think, circling back obviously how the organization in general is I think is the main problem over the years, that the teams can't find really sustainable revenue models, and like I said, 75% dependent on sponsorship. So if those pull out, you are going to go bankrupt. And VC money was a very easy way to kind of have that not sustainability, but cash flow, at least for a certain amount of time. And but on the other hand, it put them in a very difficult spot. And I think teams often get a lot of flack, and maybe not completely deserved, because they're also in a tough spot. And you say, like, salaries of players are very inflated, and part of that is because of organizations. But when you're an organization and you're trying to offer a sustainable salary, someone else will come along and offer double. So you have to kind of compete in order to stay relevant. Otherwise your sponsors are going to be pissed off. The VCs are going to be pissed off if you're not a leading team, right? So it kind of just kind of all came thundering down and became really even more unsustainable, and crazy inflated salaries, and players have put themselves in a great position, but for the long run, how's that going to pan out? And obviously during COVID you had a boom because everyone's playing games and everyone was watching games, and then I think everyone for some reason expected things to stay that way. But no, people actually had to go back to the office and work, and didn't have time to play games and watch games.
And they wanted to be social again, right?
Go out to the pub or to the park, so it was kind of expected, but no one expected it to kind of then go back to more reasonable, I guess, viewership and so on. So obviously, because during COVID people hired like crazy. Same with game devs, they hired so many people, and then obviously now we see they had to lay off people because the levels are not the same as during COVID. Same with VC money, it dried up, and because the VCs understood at some point we're never going to see our money back. The 10x, the 100x valuations that we were promised is not happening. Now I think we see teams have struggled for like the past 2 years or so. Like you said, some have gone bankrupt. We've seen mergers happening. And now EWC came in and kind of plastered over the cracks again and kind of gave a lifeline to a lot of those teams. And look, I don't know if the kind of tier 2 teams are that impacted, because obviously they didn't have the VC money in the first place, so they never offered those inflated salaries, and the tier 2 teams maybe arguably ran a more sustainable business model, and one way being punished for running a proper business, because they're now not as crazy big names as the other ones who've been throwing unsustainable money at things, and now they're not getting spotted at EWC because they're not such a big name, right? So at the end of the day, it's another thing that teams, an external source that teams are now depending on, rather than doing something internally to become sustainable, like proper merchandise strategy, content strategies, and so on. So it just postpones the need for them to create a proper business. And again, it's easy to say this from the outside. Obviously, it's not so easy to say, oh, hire some content people or create some merch. It's much more difficult than that, because plenty have tried and failed. But there's, on the other hand, there's also plenty of examples out there which do seem sustainable. Like Karma and Corp, I think, is doing very well for themselves. G2, with their kind of meme strategy has always worked really well. Phase in the
I want to list one org as well. It's called Elevate, NA org. They are actually profitable.
No, and Ants as well, is a great one. So there are definitely ways to do it, but it's our teams willing to make those sacrifices, and are they willing to lose out on an EWC spot to make it happen? Probably not. So it's kind of depends on is this EWC thing gonna keep going forever, No, then it might make sense. But are they gonna stop this program at some point? What's gonna happen then?
Yeah, I think also that I want, like, in general, I think the players are in such a good position now. And I don't blame them, you always try to advocate what is best for yourself. But if you compare it to any other sports, that they first and foremost get a hefty salary. They also usually get 90% of the prize money. And even the team stickers, for example, in CS, they get minimum 50%. And I feel at some point, how is this sustainable? Like, it has to be a change. I think organizations in general, even like, it's easy for me to spit out and like, hey, you should like demand this from the players, but then the players just go to another place where they don't do that. So I think at some point, org owners might wanna, if they want to be around, for more than a couple of more years, they need to collectively agree upon something, like depending on the game, right? If it's
Yeah. Again, I think it's difficult, and I think the better way of doing it is from at the end of the day, the league operator doing that, and in again a League of Legends, it's possible where league can say, or Riot can say, like, there's a salary cap. Players cannot earn more than, I don't know, 1 million per year or whatever. In the game like Counter-Strike, again, is more difficult because there's too many competitions, right? Maybe an EWC can grow into kind of that kind of governing body to do that. Probably not, but at least they can try. But I think the teams will never be able to group around and say, like, we're gonna this is the limit, because then another organization will come around and offer more, right? That wasn't part of this agreement. So, and I think at the end of the day, if there's certain titles with a salary cap, then the teams who can afford that salary cap will stay in those games, and they'll just avoid the Counter-Strikes and the Dotas, or they'll go in, more from like an academy kind of purpose, where they, kind of get younger players and kind of grow them and then maybe sell them. But other than that, they might not be that interested in participating in top tier Counter-Strike. So, yes, like you said, for the short term, the players have put themselves in a great position. I don't know how long that is going to be sustainable for. I think the reality is, for most of these players, by the time that it's going to be unsustainable, they're going to probably be retired anyway. So, yeah. And yeah, how much they care about the future generations, I don't know.
Yeah. So we have covered a lot of the esports topics in general, about you and your time at FaZe and so on. Let's talk a little bit about ELO Agency and what's about and what you're going to do to make it better here in this industry.
Yeah, definitely. So I think with ELO, like I already touched upon a bit already, is like, we're not looking to necessarily become an EFG or like one of these bigger organizers. We're looking to stay quite small and work with a handful of clients to really build proper, sustainable esports programs with them and for them, and really kind of advocate for that grassroots growth as well. And yeah, like I said, I think a lot of brands and so on have been burned by esports in the past, because, like you said, unsustainable numbers that have been promised that are completely inaccurate or completely out of context, or programs being offered that do not suit their game or their brand. But it was probably just the easiest way to offer them, because it's the same they're doing with other titles. So it's just kind of a copy and paste, right? And what we're trying to do is really look at what are the goals and objectives of this brand, and then tailor on that to build something that suits them, rather than something that suits us necessarily. And like I said, we really want to keep an eye on the grassroots opportunities out there, and we want to make clear to all our clients, like, if you want to do this, you need to be in it for the long term. Don't expect to make money the first year. This needs to be a 10-year program that you're going to run, or multi-year at least, because otherwise, don't bother. Then just stay out of esports. And for us, there's we're not interested in working for someone on short term and then say goodbye. We want to build long-term partnerships that we can really, have long-term sustainable revenues together with. And I think in that sense, we're kind of different in our approach than many others, where they're often offering one-off events and so on. We really want to build something long term. And if we have a client who comes to us, or a potential client who comes to us and say, like, we want to do this one-off thing, if we don't think it suits in like a longer term strategy, then we're probably not interested in doing it, because we feel like we're going to give esports a bad rap, and we're going to give ourselves a bad rap, because it never works that way. So
Yeah. So when do you already have some clients? You like starting working like already behind the scenes some, or like how has it been? The journey so far.
So I think we've started about a month ago. So it's been totally biz dev, and obviously I've been away from esports for about a year as well. So it's kind of reactivating my old network and just kind of catching up with people, and then kind of figuring out what can do for you, and also finding our position in the market as well has been a change. That in the beginning we kind of just wanted to be more strategic and more almost consultancy basis. Now what we found out is like the only ones that are interested or that's useful for is existing tournament organizers. Now the big tournament organizers probably don't want your advice. The smaller tournament organizers might want it, but to build a sustainable revenue model with them is a bit more difficult for us. They're just not going to be able to pay us enough for us to stay profitable. So basically, based on that, we've said we can also offer the operations, and then we can include game developers as well, and brands to just fully execute their program or their activations. So it's finding our feet and figuring out what works, what doesn't work. We have a bunch of projects that we're already working on. They're probably gonna not launch until next year. But yeah, we're like I said, a lot of biz dev. So if people are interested in working with us, it's always reach out, and we can at least have a conversation and see if it's a fit.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I wish you the best of luck. Do you have anyone you want to shout out to?
Well, first of all thanks to you for having me on here. It's we go way back, but we haven't caught up recently, so it's nice to have this chat and share ideas about esports and where it's going. So thanks for this opportunity, and also to kind of give a shout out to Elo. And also big shout out to my co-founder at Elo is Jan Moerland, who was unfortunately affected by the EFG layoffs, but thanks to him, I've kind of also started this journey. And also to our mutual friend Daniel Remus, who did all the branding for Elo with his company, and he's given a lot of advice and support for me to kind of get this journey going, and one of the main catalysts for me to tell me, like, just do this, just get this started and see where it leads. So I think those two people are definitely big thanks to.
All right. Thank you, Roald. I want to shout out my sponsor, Arasi. Go to arasi.com and use code ALLCHAT for 10% off. All right. Thank you, everyone.